yeah, obviously it's a long 10 years of story there, but I think the summary is that, yeah, going from my own social anxiety to coaching men on shyness and social anxiety themselves, and then kind of working with men at the opposite side of the spectrum gave me a wonderful understanding of men, and then seeing and hearing stories from thousands of women over those years just kind of wrapped it all together for me, and I think gave me this kind of unique set of experiences to really gift me in this passion of mine.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Mark. And it's
Yeah, my
hard
pleasure.
looking at you now to believe that there was a time when you were shy or lacked confidence, but obviously the work you've been doing in the world has worked in your own life as well, right?
Well, yeah, thank you, thank you. And I still consider myself an introvert, as many of my clients do as well. And yeah, it's very much something that, it's a pleasure now, as kind of from where I came, to be able to, walk into a party where I don't know anyone, or where I maybe only know one person, and to have a great night sober at that party. And that's sort of what I always wanted for myself. And that's something that I can do now, and that's something that, my clients learn to do. And even if that's not their scene, to no longer feel anxious and shy about doing that is such a gift.
Yeah. So, Mark, I really want to tap into your wisdom and take advantage of this time that we have together
Yeah.
and really help the ladies with some of the most common asked questions or areas of confusion that come up in dating and relationships.
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Okay. So is it okay if I just kind of rapid fire and we'll see what comes forward?
Let's rapid fire and see what comes of it.
Okay. So first I'm going to ask Mark kind of an overarching question, and then we'll get into some of the
Okay. Yeah.
What, from your perspective, with working both men and women and working in this area, what are some of the most common misconceptions or areas where you think women get kind of tripped up in relationships with men?
Where are the most common misconceptions? I think one of the big ones is that men are only interested in looks. I think that's a big misconception that gets thrown around, and it leads a lot of women to have limiting beliefs or to hold themselves back based on their looks. I don't look a certain way. I'm not good looking enough. So much focus gets put on looks, and that's kind of what the media promotes. And it's really not surprising that this comes up. That's a big misconception, though. We'll hopefully get a chance to talk about that. Men aren't interested in relationships is another big, I think, misconception, or men aren't interested in that connection and companionship. That's a big misconception that comes up. Probably the other one is that this is a big misconception, is that men leave because of the timing of sex. And I know my opinions are somewhat unusual in that regard, but that's a pretty big misconception. It does happen, but it's much, much rarer than most people think, or most women think. So that would be a few of the big ones that I see.
Okay. Well, those are some good places to start. So let's just dive into some of these a little bit. So there is a perception for women, especially as they age, or maybe they gain a little bit of weight, or don't feel as attractive as some other women. There is a perception among women that, wow, do I even have a chance? Do I even have a prayer? And a lot of women feel like they're competing with other women or younger women. And we see men out there online that are, looking for women 15, 20 years younger. So there is this perception like, really, is it all about looks? I mean, it can be kind of discouraging.
And you nailed it there, because there's a big part of it where it's like you see men out there that are looking for this. And, I've worked with men, you see plenty of them online, because online dating certainly has its advantages, but it's a kind of a cesspool of everyone, right? So every type of personality you'll see online, so you'll see a lot of that. You see a lot of men, who do just want to sit at home and say, hey, I want some cheap sex, so I'll search for a woman 15, 20 years younger. You see this a lot in the media. You see a lot of men who might be looking for like the sort of the trophy thing, because they might have their own insecurities where they want to look good in front of their own friends or in front of society, so they want some arm candy. So that image gets put out there a lot, and it doesn't surprise me at all that so many women are coming to me and going, or to you and going, hey, like, I'm not good looking enough, or I don't have enough to sort of offer. Now, what was the second part of your question? Is sort of why is that wrong? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, and for women, that are a little bit older or they're feeling like they're competing with the younger women, or they don't feel like they're, what we might call beautiful, is there hope for them? Is there a chance for them? Because I think a lot of women feel like, wow, I don't know. Have I missed
yeah,
my chance,
yeah.
or am I not attractive enough? Can I ever attract someone? So I'm wondering from the male perspective, what hope you can give, and do men really
Yeah.
look deeper than that? Because people say that, men say that, but we want the truth, Mark. Like, do men really look deeper than
Well, here's the truth. Are supermodels the only ones in relationships?
that? Right.
The truth speaks for itself. There's women and men of all ages, of every age, in fulfilling relationships. I mean, of course, we can cite examples where people are only together because, there's a sugar mummy daddy situation, or someone wants someone younger. But there's also millions of examples around the world, tens of millions, where there's women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s finding happy, fulfilling love. It's everywhere, and you can see it when you look for it. And I see it when I coach. I see it when I look for it, because I see examples everywhere. So it's pretty clear that both men and women are committing to people who aren't the next Victoria's Secret model or whatever. There's a lot of advantages that older women have in dating. You bring a lot more intelligence, you bring a lot more maturity, you bring a lot more sort of worldliness. You've often traveled the world. You make a better, more secure, more sort of yourself better. You might be more confident in your feminine. You might be more confident in your sexuality at that point. There's a lot of radiance that comes, as you age, and as you bring more and more sort of life experiences and qualities to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, there's always going to be a superficial attractiveness to youth. But what you have to remember is that the value of physical looks, what does physical looks do? It's this. It's the glance. And, if you're a 40-something woman and you're on the footpath walking next to a 20-something woman and a random man standing there, he's more likely to turn his head to the 20-something than the 40-something. That's just biology. That's how it is. That's the truth. But here's the big but. As soon as these women open their mouths, as soon as he's talking to them, as soon as personality, as soon as energy, as soon as feminism, feminine energy, what I mean by that, as soon as these, this radiance, as soon as her respect and the way she operates in the world starts to come across, then these aspects start to shift. Because if a man is looking for arm candy, sure, he's going to go for the 20-year-old, but it's pretty clear from all these relationships out there that there's plenty of men who aren't looking for arm candy. And once he meets those two women and he gets to know this 40 or 50 or whatever it is, something who has all these amazing traits, who adds to his life, whom he can see as an equal, who lights up his world, who has all these things going, like no man who's looking for anything other than arm candy in that age group is going to go for the 20-year-old. He's going to go for the woman in his age group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I always say you're really not competing if you're a woman, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. You're really not competing with those 20-year-olds, because the kind of man that wants that is not going to be your guy anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And it's the different qualities. You're going to light up that man who wants that. You're going to light up his life in a very different way that, a guy that wants a 20-something, 20 years younger is going to, you're right. You're competing in completely different sort of playing fields.
Mm-hmm. So now let's come back to another thing that you said, which is about men and relationships. And I think for most women, it feels like a priority, a deep desire to have a loving, committed relationship. And yet there's a lot of talk out there about men being unable to commit, the non-committal type men. And sometimes I think it's a question in a lot of women's minds as to whether or not relationships, specifically that kind of relationship and partnership, is really important to most men. And I know we're speaking in general terms here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and it's probably important to put that asterisk on everything we say, because I was saying to you before the interview, I get very specific with clients, and we do have to talk in general terms with these sorts of questions.
Right.
Yeah. So to answer your question, so there is absolutely going to be more negative associations the typical man has with commitment than the typical woman. A lot of this is simply because of the way boys and girls are raised, to be honest with you. If you think about the movies or the messages that are portrayed to young women or young girls, it's usually about, hey, you know, like look forward to getting married and looking forward to like raising a family, and you're going to have a great life as an adult. You're going to have your own kids and it's going to be amazing, and your wedding day, oh my God. And, you know, young girls start to go, oh, my wedding day, like that must be like my happiest moment, like when I'm fully loved and da-da-da. And these sort of associations start to set in. Mm-hmm. And then with men, what's the message? It's usually something along the lines of, hey, you know, get out there in the world, go, you know, conquer the world, have your fun, and then settle down and have a family. You hear that message a lot, right?
Right.
So when you actually think about what's being said there, it's like, have your fun, go conquer, then settle down and have a family. The central message is kind of that's delivered to women is, hey, once you're at commitment, once you're at marriage, your happiness is going to peak. Like commitment equals happiness. That's kind of the association. Whereas with men, it's kind of like, go do your thing, be happy, and then commit. It's like happiness and fun comes before commitment. So you see a lot more men with kind of this kind of ingrained ball and chain type belief as it relates to commitment. But in the end, the proof is in the pudding, because as I said before, you see men of every age, especially as they do get a bit older, you know, they enter their 30s and things, and men start to become a lot more, they come around a lot more to the idea of commitment. And we can see why. When you see things like the mental health statistics of older men who lose their wives, when you see things like the studies that show, you know, how much a man struggles to, if a man's feeling depressed, he goes to his wife over 70% of the time. If a wife is feeling depressed, she goes to her husband, 35% of the time. A woman becomes his emotional outlet. Women are much better at connecting with their female friends, and they're much better at having vulnerable relationships with those female friends where they can express emotion. Whereas that's one thing men are not really encouraged to do growing up. It's not considered masculine. It's not considered manly. And that woman, his partner, becomes the source of his, you know, it becomes his companion, his best friend. Like that's the one person he can be vulnerable with and cry in front of. He can't say that shit to old Steve, right? And so pretty soon, as they go through their 20s and 30s, men start to realize the value of this companion, like the extraordinary gift that an emotional, deep companion has in their life. And like I say, if you want evidence, just literally do it right now. Look up the suicide statistics of men who are over 50 and get divorced compared to women. It's far, far higher for men, and it demonstrates just how important that companion is in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so true. I think that's so true. I can think of a couple of men in my community here who both lost their wives to cancer. One, he was in his late 40s, one in his early 50s. And I mean, these two men, both amazing, successful men, but they were completely
It does bounce back well. Hey,
lost
so sad.
Without the women in their lives. Now, both of them happily have now found other partners and have remarried. But for a period of time, I mean, these men were just like a ship without a rudder. They were so incredibly lost, and they're amazing, successful men.
Yeah, and that's, you know, they're probably men who, by the sounds of it, are pretty mentally healthy, you know, or at the top of their game, or in a good relationship, had stuff sorted. You know, imagine a man who's a little less stable, or imagine a man who's not quite as confident or not quite as successful. You know, you can. Yeah, I think a lot of women underestimate this incredible value that they bring to a man's life. And, you know, all the focus always gets put on sex, you know, this whole message around, oh, you know, the sex is the best thing, so save it till later. And it's such BS. You know, when you look at these relationships and what these women are really bringing to their partners' lives, it's so much more than sex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, since you brought up sex again, I want to not leave the ladies hanging, because you said that your take on the timing of sex and men leaving depending upon the timing of sex was maybe a little different than what most people's take is out there. And so I know the ladies want to hear your take since you brought that up.
Yeah, this one surprises a lot of women. And the reason is because men leave after sex a lot, right? A lot of women have experienced that. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have experienced that. If you're watching, I'm sure you've experienced that where a man has left after sex. Women do leave after sex too. We should make that point. That does happen, but it's more often men that will leave after sex. But here's the thing. Men don't go to their friends and say, oh, bro, I just met this amazing, compassionate, sexy, like incredible woman. She lit up my life. She has this amazing social circle. She's kicking butt. She's so, healthy, and she's just the most incredible. She just adds to my life. She's just so phenomenal. But I can't date her now because she slept with me too soon. Men don't say that. You could probably find a tiny little subsection of men that say that, but that's very, very rare. The real reason that men are leaving after sex is because there's physical attraction and there's non-physical attraction. And because for women, these so often go hand in hand, they don't as easily understand this concept that men can go, hey, I've got physical attraction, but not really the non-physical stuff. So many of the things we've been talking about, a few others. So they say, well, I can sleep with her because I've got physical attraction. But once that physical attraction goes away, because whether you sleep with a guy on the first date, the 10th date, or you wait until marriage, that physical attraction, it's not going to prop up the ship, right, on its own. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of women, what they've experienced is, the physical attraction is unfortunately the only thing that's there, and then the guy leaves after sex. But there's also a lot of women who have met their partners on the first date, slept with them, and gone on to a relationship. There's lots of women who've waited as well and gone on to a relationship. But what was really key in every situation is that the man said, she lights up my life. She's amazing. I want her personality. I want her energy. I want her spirit. I want her warmth. I want these things in my life. I want a high quality woman in my life. So if the non-physical attraction is there, if the guy is really not physically attracted and he just thinks you're top notch, then as long as the rest of the things are right, and as long as, and this is where we get into standards and not letting your standards drop after sex, which happens a lot too, but as long as these things are all okay, then it won't matter when you sleep with them.
Mm-hmm. So one question I have about this, a follow-up question, Mark, is because you're talking about the physical attraction and the non-physical attraction. And the non-physical attraction is more about who the woman is, not just her looks, right?
Lots of elements of that. Yeah, like her self-respect, her energy, the way, her feminine side, her attitudes towards men. Is she cultivating her own life, her standards? Yeah, all these other factors.
Mm-hmm. So my question is, it seems like it takes time for a man to know this non-physical side, this non-physical attraction side. And so that, for me, makes the argument of waiting a while for sex make sense in my mind, in my female mind, because I'm thinking, how can he even know all of these things about her? Yeah, he might have a sense of who she is. He really doesn't know. And in order for him to develop kind of that emotional connection to her, that emotional attraction to her, not just the physical attraction, it seems like there's an argument to be made for waiting for a little while so a man has a chance to get to know that about a woman. So that's kind of a question in a statement form, but
I hear what you're saying there. Yeah, and this is where standards come into play. Because you're right, you can't fully know someone on the first date, can you? Or even a fifth date, right? You can sort of you can start to get a decent idea. And would you agree that you have a pretty good idea if you want to at least see the person again?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a good idea of at least if you want to see the person again, but you're right, you can't fully know someone. So as a woman, you have a good idea after a first date, I want to see him again. things are heading in the right direction. I can't say he's Prince Charming or anywhere near it. I can say I'd like a second date because he's pretty freaking cool. Same for a man. Same for a man, right? So he meets a woman, and you're right, he cannot know all the non-physical attraction, not in one date, not in 10. He does have an idea of whether or not he wants to see her again.
Right.
He does have an idea of whether she's a cool chick or a cool woman and wants to see her again. So what's key is that if you do make the decision to have sex early, and this is where the standards is so important, is that it still means that you're very much assessing him and you're very much on the same page as him in that you don't really know each other, right? If you are deciding to sleep with a man sooner, this is very important, then it's because you want to enjoy the sex and perhaps you are interested in getting to know him more, but you still need to keep the attitude, he can lose me as much as I can lose him. What happens for a lot of women if they do decide to have sex early is that the hormones kind of go crazy as they do often after you sleep with someone. And they switch from this mindset of, do I like this guy? To, will this guy keep liking me? And if you do decide to have sex early, then you need to be able to basically put the hormones aside and keep your standards, because the man must feel like he still has to qualify himself. Because if you're thinking one way before sex and a totally opposite way after sex, then sex will be the catalyst that means he loses respect for you and thus attraction. So if you do decide to have sex early, then it has to be with basically the same attitude he has, which is that, you know what, I enjoyed some sex for me because I wanted to. I'm proud of that decision. And if this guy proves himself, if he keeps going, he'll get some more. He'll get some more of my energy. He'll get some more of my personality. He'll get some more of my warmth in his life. He even get some more sex because we had fun. But he can still very much stuff this up. And if he stops putting in effort, I'm going to drop this guy. So you still have to apply your standards in the same way after sex. That's very important for attraction. First date or fifth date or 10th, 50th date, but especially if you're deciding to have sex early, you must be able to put your standards in place afterwards. He should still feel like he's working hard to keep your interest.
Yeah. And I think that hormonal piece that you brought up is what makes this really tricky for women, because I do think that for women, we have these bonding hormones that come forward and can kind of cause a little bit of in other words, it's easier said than done is what I'm trying to say, Mark, what you're talking.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't actually know this. Men also have a vasopressin release after orgasm, which bonds them to their partners too. Now, it's often not as strong as the sort of dopamine, oxytocin one, as women experience. But I think this is kind of key, is that you can wait till 5th date, you can wait till 10th date. You still have to be able to put your standards in place. Self-respect, standards must always come before feelings, irrelevant of when you sleep with him. Because if you have all these standards till the 10th date, and then after the 10th date, we switch to this mindset where he can do no wrong, he's going to have lost respect by the 20th. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And sometimes I've actually had this happen in reverse once myself, where there was a woman that I was particularly into. And she sort of bailed after the sex. And I was kind of the one going, oh, now I want to chase her. But I knew I wouldn't be respecting myself by doing so. And putting, like I say, whenever the sex is, you must be able to still be able to say, look, if this person's not treating me well, if this person's not giving me the time, I'm out. And even though it sucks and I don't really want to do it, I'm gonna walk away right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that, because I think this piece about the standards and your own self-respect applies to so many situations. Of course, the one we've been talking about, but so many situations in dating, and is really key.
It's so key. It's so key. There's a lot of women I work with on this where, it is about them hardening up those boundaries and kind of saying, you know what, like, as much as I hate to do this, as much as all I want to do is give my beautiful energy to you, and that love that we were talking about, that men value so much. A lot of women give it over and over to men. In extreme example, narcissists and these types of men who don't value it and who don't treat it like the gift that it is, and they're not willing to withdraw it when a man is not reciprocating that same love and respect back to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's such an important point. This giving and giving and giving more when you're not getting that reciprocal appreciation and you're not getting anything back. And I think there is a trap that women can fall into. I think women tend to have really strong giving muscles. Their receiving muscles are not always as strong. And I think there is a temptation to feel like if I give more, he'll give more back to me. But that usually doesn't go that way.
Yes, that usually doesn't go that way, unfortunately. I think it's a statement and a testament to the beautiful empathic giving energy of the feminine right there. But yes, unfortunately, I have seen that energy used by more than one narcissist and more than one sort of non-reciprocal man. And it's the women that really internalize this idea of this giving energy that I have. This is like the most valuable thing in the world to a man. And they remember that and they say, if I'm not going to get that back, do you know what? I'm going to walk away and give it to a man who will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another couple of questions, Mark, and these are kind of maybe, hopefully I can make them a little bit more rapid fire. What about where a woman experiences that, this happens a lot online, where there's a conversation going, messaging back and forth, seems like there's some interest, but a man never really takes it any further. And women are confused. They're like, well, how long do we message back and forth? Does he want anything other than a cyber relationship? Do I do something? Do I take the next move? Again, this can come back to the standards piece that we talked about, but it's confusing because this happens to a lot of women online.
Yeah, this is a bit more technical because we are in online dating, which is kind of a weird, technical, not really real, but real world. The big thing with online, there's a few things to remember. One is that you're going to have let me begin. The first thing is that online dating is not online dating. It's online meeting. And always think of online dating as online meeting, because what online dating does is it takes away most of the best things about dating. It takes away actual dates. It takes away verbally talking to people. It takes away personalized connection. What it gives you is one very big thing. It gives you a giant pool of people that you can access. That is good. That is a huge, huge thing, but you pay for it with these other things that I spoke about. So think of online dating as online meeting as a way to get access to more men. Because there's so many more men, the average man you meet online, the average connection compared to a guy that you'd meet at a networking event or through a friend or even at a bar, the average quality is going to be much lower. If you meet 10 men in a bar, it'd probably take 100 men online to meet the same caliber of connection, because you're not talking to them, you're not getting their vibes, etc. So that's the first thing. You have to log on online knowing that you're going to get a lot of low quality interactions. That's part of the price you pay for logging in. That's part of, if you want to take advantage of this 1 million person pool, that's part of the payment. The second thing that I really encourage with clients is 12 messages to the phone. Literally, if you can do 6 messages each, and obviously sometimes it's going to be a little more. If the conversation's great, go more. But use online meeting for online meeting and then get off online meeting. In other words, get really good at quickly taking guys from online to a phone call. Because then you're getting their vibe, then you're talking to them, then you're working on your social skills, then you're meeting more men properly, and you're not stuffing around with your thumbs on a phone. You're speaking to real people in real time. It is scarier, but it's a great filter, because a lot of the guys that will waste your time with messages won't bother calling. So instantly, you can get rid of a whole heap. The ones that do call have then put in more effort. You get to know them better, and you decide much more quickly, much more effectively which ones you go on a date with. In short, rapid fire, that's the best way to answer that question.
So one really quick follow-up. If a man and a woman have exchanged these messages back and forth and he still hasn't asked for her phone number or to call her, how does a woman bring that to that point?
Hey, I'm not a big texter. This is my number. Give me a call after 7 tonight.
Perfect. Okay, got it. So what's your opinion, Mark, about women making the first move? And I know that can be done in a lot of ways. And I specifically want to also have you answer about your opinion about women asking a man out.
Yeah. I think it's a useful tool to have in your arsenal. I think it goes a little bit against the masculine-feminine polarity, and that's where it can run into some trouble. I always find, and this is an interesting difference between coaching men and women. Coaching men, you're out there, they're approaching women, they're making the first move, they're mostly getting rejected, but you get some success. That's just the nature of it when you coach men, right? The nice thing about coaching women is you don't have to put your clients through as much rejection, because you can tend to get the men to approach them through basically what I call green light theory, which is, as a woman, the better you get at giving green lights and getting the guy to make the move, basically the more success that you'll have. This is why if you're in a conversation with a guy, you're much better off saying, well, when are you going to ask for my number, than you are asking for his number. Right? Because you're giving a giant green light, but you're still making him make the move. You're still being vulnerable. You're still putting your neck on the line, which is good. Vulnerability, always good. But you're not actually doing it for him. So something like, when are you going to ask me out? I generally like more than just directly asking the guy out. I certainly think you can do that. And as I say, it's a useful tool to have in your arsenal. However, what I'd add in is that if you make a big move, like asking a guy out, expect him to do the next couple. Expect him to then, he has to reciprocate that. If you ask the first date, you definitely want him asking the second, probably calling you after, again, green light him to do so, but you want him to do the actual thing. Otherwise, you kind of kill the polarity. And for most women that I coach, they want that passion. They want to feel chased. They want to feel wanted, which means it needs that polarity, that masculine feminine polarity. And thus, if you're doing all the moves or even most of them, you're going to kill that polarity and probably end up in relationships where you're not finding yourself passionately attracted or chased by the guy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I love this green lighting concept, because I think most women, even women that are very strong, successful, independent women, most of these women want to be with a man that is taking the lead,
Yes,
and that there is that polarity. So
yeah, agree.
Yeah, and I do think, for me, I have this theory. So I want to run this past you.
Yeah, sounds good.
I feel like, Mark, one of the downsides of a woman asking a man out is that I think the way a relationship starts tends to set the tone for the rest of that relationship. Now, can it ever change? Yes. But just generally speaking, I feel like it's kind of hard to get out of those dance steps that you start out. If you start out with the woman leading, it kind of feels like it has a tendency for things to kind of continue on that track. Maybe it's because people don't have this awareness of, okay, now I did this, and now he has to make a move, or I'm not doing anymore. But my theory is that the way things start out tends to set the tone for the rest of the relationship.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's why it's important, if you are going to make a big move, like asking a guy out, you definitely want to expect that move at a minimum reciprocated. At a minimum, you'd want him asking the second one, because at least then you're operating, a 50-50 sort of balance. And don't get me wrong, there are ways to polarize the relationship outside of just asking each other out. I mean, let's say a woman asks a man out, and then he asks her out, and then she's like, I'm keen to see you, and he says, yeah, I'm keen to see you too, and it becomes a nice equal polarity, but they might have very polarizing sex, for example. He might be very dominant and she might be very submissive in the bedroom, so they could get get more of their polarity from that sort of aspect of their relationship. So I think there's definitely different avenues for polarization and passion. I agree with you in that, in general, the way you start will continue. So you want to make sure that you start without at most operating sort of 50% of the movements. But really, you can do basically the same thing by just getting really good at green lighting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to think of some other questions that I might want to ask you, because this is so juicy and I'm just so caught up in it. I feel like
it's good fun, isn't it?
I know. I feel like I could talk to you all evening here. It's morning where you are, right?
It is. It is. It's 11:30. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So do you feel like, Mark, in this environment that we're now in the world, where there's all of this, Me Too movement and stuff like that,
yeah,
I feel like that makes it harder for men to approach women? I mean, what's your sense of this? I just want to hear about your.
I haven't coached men since the Me Too movement has been around. I think yes, it does. I think yes, it does make it more challenging for men, especially because there are a lot of men like myself who kind of start out as a classic nice guy, who have a genuine respect for women, who genuinely want what's best for women, but who maybe don't have that, or the understanding that I now have that I didn't used to, that women do want a man who's dominant, who do want a man who's strong. Sometimes consent can be a non-verbal thing, and I've been with women who have looked at me and who have been clearly consenting, and then we've enjoyed ourselves and there's been clear consent, even though verbal cues weren't exchanged. I'm sure you've had experiences at times where things happen and an actual verbal consent is just it doesn't necessarily become part of sex. And that's, at the same time, obviously consent is the biggest thing in the world, the biggest and most important thing in the world. And that's where, it can be challenging sometimes for a man if he's not sure, if he's a bit uncertain, if he's like myself, like I used to be, sort of lacking in confidence, a bit shy. He's not good at reading signals. A lot of men can be quite poor, reading body language signals or body language indicators that, do I make a move or will I be the next one on the sort of the Me Too movement? Yeah, I think it can be challenging. It's a challenge that can absolutely be overcome, and men are just going to have to learn to overcome it. I do think it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So this again comes back to the importance of women becoming perhaps more skilled at green lighting and creating that opening or that space or that permission, so to speak, for a man to approach or.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In most contexts, if you can, because a lot of, I imagine for a lot of women, if they're sort of, and if we take a sex example, if they're sort of in bed and the guy says, "Oh, can I have sex with you now?" It's a bit of a buzzkill. I think if we're honest, it's a bit of a mood kill, but you still must have that consent. And that's where it's an interesting question, not one I've really been asked before, but that's where, you want the man who can read the signal, yes, and who can read the signal, no.
Mm-hmm.
If it needs to be verbal, it should absolutely be verbal. But I think ideally what a woman wants is a man that understands her, so she can clarify with verbal, and absolutely being able to clarify with verbal and getting confidence in any sort of standard setting and saying no is extremely important. And that's something I've recently coached quite a number of clients in. But also being able to get your signals well, especially with men that you're comfortable with and men that you get to know, where they can understand your yeses and they can understand your nos without, having to write up a contract or anything.
Right. Yeah. So,
interesting question. I'm curious to your take on it, actually. Have you talked to men about that?
I have. I've been actually asking this question to quite a number of the men on the man panel, because it's a hot topic. It's a big issue out there in the world, and obviously something that needed to come to light. Mm-hmm. And because I'm having this opportunity to speak with so many men right now, I am asking about it. And most men are saying, yes, it does make them pause a bit in terms of, what can I do and how can I approach to make sure that, my intentions are not
Yeah.
misinterpreted or misunderstood.
Yeah, and especially when you have a sort of partner, you get comfortable with that, and if you want to take things to the next level, I've heard lots of women say, oh, I really like, for example, if a woman likes a man who's quite physical, throws her up against a wall or something like that. That's much sexier, or at least I've heard this feedback from a lot of women, that that's much sexier if it's an act of passion rather than an act of permission. So men need to have this understanding, and there needs to be this, both genders to understand each other and those subverbal signals, so that passion can thrive as well as consent can be clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be a little bit tricky for both men and women. I think it can be a bit tricky.
Yeah.
And I do feel like this is why it's so important for women to, first of all, understand and know what their own needs and desires are, and then be able to articulate them, communicate them, and to give those clues, those verbal or non-verbal,
without having to spell the whole thing out and turn off the whole situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, we could have a whole conversation about that, but it's a very interesting topic. So another question I just want to ask you, Mark, is there's this perception for a lot of women that men are intimidated by successful women. And I have a feeling I know where you're going to go with this, but I would like to hear what you have to say about that, because I know a lot of the women in this audience have successful careers, may have, achieved a lot in their own lives. And of course they should be proud of that, and they want to let their light shine. And yet there's this perception, and I'm asked a lot by women if men are intimidated by successful women. Now, I have my opinion, but I want to hear yours.
Sure. Great question. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to consider here. The first is that what's your intent? Always go back to intent. And if you're meeting men and the first thing you're telling them is about your, how crazy successful you are or big you are, I would be asking myself, what's the intent, and is it coming from the right place? Myself, for example, if someone asked me, I would say I'm a dating coach, or I would say I'm a YouTuber. But for example, I'm not going to say, oh, I have this many subscribers, or I'm this. And you can feel the difference in the statements. One is me just answering honestly. The other is me trying to prove something, to prove a point. And it's kind of a turn-off. If you meet like a hotshot DJ, and you just think he's a cool guy, you don't even know he's a hotshot DJ or whatever, the CEO or whatever, but you don't know that about him, and then you find that out passively, like, that's really cool, because you got to know that person, and then you realize, oh wow, they actually have this. Wow, they didn't even, that's cool. That's really sexy. Now I know that. Whereas if that person strides up to you and is like, I'm a hotshot DJ, or guess what I am? I'm a CEO. You're just like, oh my God. It's the intent is totally different, right?
Right.
So the first thing I'd say is make sure you're not using, where's your intent coming from, and make sure you're not using it as a way to sort of impress or prove yourself, because that can be a turn off. Now, the second thing I'd probably say, and two more points on this. The first is that I've coached a few clients through this, and one issue that I've had, and this wouldn't be for every successful woman, but for some, is that they've kind of aimed low and shot themselves in the foot, in terms of they are in dating pools that are more reflective of their inner self-esteem than their outer success. And if she's very outwardly successful, inside having some battles with self-esteem and unworthiness and stuff, her tendency might be to aim lower for men who, perhaps do not meet her standards. I have one example of a client. She's amazing. She's early 30s, beautiful, successful, just doing so many things right. And she's been, a couple of times dated really kind of low quality, emotionally unavailable men. And she sort of said, oh, they're intimidated. I said, maybe, but you're dating down. Like, you got to stop dating down. I won't say a name there, but I'll keep the name private. But you got to stop dating down, because you're literally shooting yourself in the foot. And I said to her, how many friends do you have that are like the guy you want to date? Because we obviously write out their ideal man, and her whole social circle, she was far and away the most emotionally intelligent, the highest self-esteem, the kind of biggest catch in her whole social circle. So she wasn't even around women who would be around the type of men that she wanted to date. So that would be the second point, is make sure you're in the right pool and that you're not sort of aiming down. And the third thing I would say is that women that I've coached in these sorts of situations who ask this question, often very successful professionally, struggle to get into their feminine in their personal relationships. Mm-hmm. I've coached surgeons, emergency specialists, I've coached CEOs, I've coached bankers. Many of them struggle to switch off the planning, structured, rigid, forward-thinking, even controlling sort of mindset that they have at work. And with a lot of classic men, that's the more masculine mindset, right? So if you're in that mindset at home, what happens if you put two opposite sides of a magnet together, right? They push each other apart. So if you're in this mindset when you're in your personal relationships, then you'll often push away quite masculine men. And so for a lot of these women, connecting with their feminine side, things like letting the man lead, trusting, practicing presence, connecting with their bodies, connecting with their sexuality. I even have many sort of speak to orgasm coaches and things like these, allowing them to connect with their feminine side and to sort of switch that masculine off after work and go into their feminine, allows them to polarize and attract these masculine men in their personal relationships while still kicking butt and being successful in their business and professional life.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a fantastic answer. I love that. That was really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
One of the things that I really loved is that you started out with the intention, and you brought up the fact that if someone just says, well, like you said, well, I'm a dating coach, you're not going to say, and I've got 10 million plus views on YouTube.
It's douchey,
but
right?
When someone finds that out about you, they're like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, not only is he a dating coach, but, wow, he's really been out there doing something. So you allowed them to kind of discover that about you on the side. And the way I like to frame it up for the women that I talk to is, have you ever seen one of those gifts, Mark, where like maybe there's something really small, like a piece of jewelry that's wrapped in a small box, but then there's like 5 or 6 other larger boxes that it's wrapped inside, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen one of those gifts where you have to like keep opening?
I only had passed the parcel as a kid. I feel like I've been robbed now because I haven't been given one of these gifts.
I know. Well, it's a very cool way to give a piece of jewelry to a woman. If you might want to try it.
Great. I will
So,
know
like,
that.
you take the small box, and then there's these larger boxes.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That makes
down.
Is there things in the other boxes, or they're just boxes?
No, they're just boxes. But it's all beautifully. They're all beautifully presented, though.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Aesthetics is really important here.
Yeah.
So this is how I like to describe to women how I believe they should allow a man to get to know them. Yes, you want to look your best and you put your best foot forward, even if you're not what you would consider to be classically beautiful. You're putting your best foot forward. And so you're like this beautiful gift, but the man doesn't really get to see all of these different layers. I mean, not on the first date or as he gets to know you, you let him discover these additional, layers of you until he gets to that true essence of getting to know who you really are, this beautiful diamond or this beautiful precious gem or piece of jewelry inside. I'm using an analogy here, obviously.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that in the context of what you were talking about in terms of how we show up, that we don't necessarily have to show up trying to impress a man with accomplishments, achievements, in a I got to impress him kind of way. And I think that's why sometimes, I'm guilty of this back when I was dating.
Yep.
I can remember one man in particular, I really wanted him to like me. So I did kind of lead with my accomplishments because I wanted him to be impressed. It didn't work.
Yeah, it's never good, is it? And it's one thing that, I think wherever my business goes in the future, I was at a festival recently, and I loved meeting people just for our personalities. No one knew who I was. I wasn't in some coaching circuit. It was amazing. And these people sort of learned later about my reputation, but I feel like there's so much better friends now because we spent 5 days together without, without delving too deeply, just connecting as people, as humans. We didn't have to prove anything. We were just humans connecting. And that I think means a lot. And if you can date like that, just, hey, I'm enough. My energy is enough. My presence is enough. My wit is enough. My sass is enough. My just my being here, which will be enough to attract you. And then later on, he, as you say, finds that diamond. Like, oh, she's actually like incredibly motivated and respected and successful. It's like, that's real freaking cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that intrinsic knowing who you are, knowing your own intrinsic value is really so much a key to everything we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of comes back to some of the deeper life coaching stuff and making sure you're working on you and any mindsets that are making you think you're not a catch.
Yeah. Mark, I want to just give you a chance to maybe just leave us with one last parting thought or word of encouragement or whatever you want to leave for the ladies here before we wrap up. I know I put you on the spot there, but you can handle it. I know you can.
Yeah, I think one of my sayings is make fate happen. Is that you work on yourself, you do the work, you put yourself in the in the different places that challenge you and put yourself out there and really put yourself first and your self-respect first, live to the best you, and that's when lightning tends to strike.
I love it. That's a great way to end. Well, thank you so much again, Mark. It's been really fun to chat with you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we hope to see you for more. Bye for now.